Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24 and with Cyril Payan, who's just back from Yemen. Yemen, of course, a war in many ways forgotten. 22,000 people have been killed, more than 50,000 wounded, more than 2 million people displaced. Cyril was just back from Aden when you landed there. What was it like?
Very disturbing indeed when you just land there after a few months of waiting for having just the way to be able to get in this forgotten war. There is no witnesses in this war. So when we actually landed in Aden, it was just all volatility and chaotic scenes. It's really a town which is at war and has been going on for the past 3 years.
Cyril, thank you very much. Cyril's film, Aden, A Forgotten War by Cyril Payan and Amar Al-Amadawi.
We are heading north towards the front line. It splits the country in two. More than 300 kilometers of coastal road, military roadblocks, and abandoned villages. The sea and the desert stretch as far as the eye can see. The Gulf of Aden, the Somali coast, Djibouti, then the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, or the Gate of Tears. We enter into the heart of Yemen, where one of the least reported conflicts on Earth is being played out. The village of Al-Taryata was until recently still held by the Houthi rebels, who control North Yemen and the capital, Sana'a, less than 200 kilometers away. There is no one here anymore except the southern militia, who are massing their forces in the region to better control the buffer zone. From here on, you can only go forward in an armored convoy.
We're continuing the offensive against these dogs. We advance in front of the enemy. We clear everything, too. We're getting rid of mines in fields, villages, and this road, of course.
This tank unit is part of the elite forces of the Southern Resistance, the armed wing of the coalition led by the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia against the Houthi rebellion, which the coalition says is financed by Iran. The tanks will advance a few kilometers, taking the front a little further north into the desert. It's here we will also discover the other face of the war in Yemen, a regional conflict involving several Sunni nations behind closed doors. It's hard to know what the real mission of these Sudanese forces in Yemen is, but their message leaves no room for confusion.
We cut the throats of the Houthi dogs.
I'll tell you, I'll eat them all raw. Today and not tomorrow, I will devour them.
Once their surprise at seeing us wears off, an officer appears.
What are you doing here? You can't film here.
The camera has to be put away, and we are asked to leave. Aden, the ancient capital of the Kingdom of Saba. From the time Yemen was known as Blessed Arabia. Now it's a city besieged by the southern rebels, its economy in tatters after 3 long years of conflict. A conflict which no one here sees ending anytime soon, and whose scars are everywhere. Civil war, tribal war, terrorism. The city is in turmoil, under constant threat of attack. Military checkpoints are a daily reminder of the instability.
The problem is that they are all armed. They don't have separate uniforms. It's chaos. We don't know who they really are. That's why there are attacks and nobody really knows who's in control of what around here.
Yes, everyone in town is armed.
Yes, I tell you, the big problem here is these weapons. We must put the arms in the hands of the state.
Representatives of the state, here they are, at least what's left of them. A few hundred men entrenched in their garrison in the center of Aden. They're the last loyalist forces defending a government that's all but finished.
You guys are crazy. Get your butts in gear. What nerve.
The colonel doesn't like questions about the fighting a few weeks ago when the city was besieged by southern rebels.
That's politics. I can't talk about it.
But we're talking about the war and not politics, right?
Okay, that's all right then. There was a little misunderstanding between us and the Southerners. Thanks to God, all the problems are behind us. We've moved past these small quarrels between Yemenis. Everyone now agrees that we should support the president together. No one disputes his authority.
All is well in Colonel Haidaruz's world. To prove this, he shows off his latest recruits newly arrived.
You must respect your homeland, this sacred soil that you walk upon. Never forget that this country gives you food. I also order you to learn to respect your colleagues like brothers.
Government-guaranteed pay is often the only motivation for Yemenis who've lost everything in the war. But you can still find patriotic zeal.
Here we have to keep our country and to protect the flag we work under. As everybody knows that we have many enemies surrounding our country and inside.
These men are all volunteers. They're here to go to the front. We train them and we make them real soldiers. They're motivated. You can see they came with their own weapons.
But the colonel's optimism may be the last hurrah of a routed army. This is the Crater district in the heart of Aden. Among the million residents, there is a new population. The refugees from this war are everywhere, often forced to beg.
We have nothing to live on, no money, no resources. It will be 4 years that we've eked out a living. Sometimes we get some help from the family, but we can only rely on ourselves.
1,000 days of war, 10,000 dead, and millions of displaced people fleeing the front to the north. Ahmad is one of them. 8 years old and an orphan, he has been living for months in Aden's cemetery.
I found a bit of work. I clean the graves. I water the plants. There are always a lot of people who gather here. A lot of people come here. I can get some money. Sometimes I get 300 or even 500 rials. It's a good job, actually.
A few months ago, Ahmad joined a group of street children, refugees who don't appear in official statistics.
Frankly, I'm not complaining. Here, at least we can find something to eat properly. It's true we live from day to day, but in the street, there's respect. There are even people here who help us, sometimes.
Why are you filming that one? He's from the north, he's not from here, he's not one of ours.
Just a few blocks away, the loyalist forces of Colonel Haidaruz's brigade have launched an anti-terrorist operation.
Clear the street, go!
A demonstration of strength or a last attempt to save face. It's mostly propaganda for the Yemenis and for the international community, which continues to recognize the country's struggling government.
We're putting up roadblocks in the area. We've received information. A car bomb entered Aden this morning.
After 10 minutes, the brigade heads back to its central garrison in Aden. In one of the most secure areas in Yemen's second city, we meet one of the country's strongmen, a warlord and self-proclaimed governor of Aden.
The enemy we face is clearly identified, but extremely dangerous. He is an enemy with multiple faces. He receives massive logistical and financial support from abroad. It is the axis of evil that sends him millions of dollars. This enemy comprises the jihadists of Daesh and Al-Qaeda, the Houthis and the forces of former President Saleh. But thanks to God and also thanks to the support of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia coalition soldiers and all the forces working for freedom, we control the situation and the city of Aden.
The Gulf of Aden and access to the vast Indian Ocean is one of the major strategic issues of the Yemeni conflict. Controlling the sea is one of the keys to the war. Those who live along the coast now find themselves on the front line.
There are plenty of coalition military boats on the open sea. They impose a security cordon of 500 meters. We try to respect it, but sometimes we have to follow the fish. And each time, they shoot above us. There are dead and wounded in this sea. The coalition soldiers are ruthless. Why do they have to shoot us? We're only poor unarmed fishermen. We're just trying to survive, that's all. Making a living has become too difficult. Now our job is to just buy fuel, pay a fortune, and come back with nothing. The suffering is so great.
Nostalgia pervades Yemen, the distant memory of happier times and of peace.
If I could get back some of the good times that have passed, I'd be happy. This goes for fishing, of course, but it's not just that. It's also the relationships with the other fishermen. Before, if your neighbor didn't see you for a few hours, he'd be worried. Now we can stay home starving for a week without anyone coming to check. As the saying here goes, our elders have gone and good manners disappeared with them.
It's the end of the day for Ahmad, the little war orphan.
It ended up being impossible to stay in the north. At any moment, you could get shot in the head with a bazooka. It was really too hard. Here we sleep and we work. Every day I ask God to find something to eat and to survive. Sometimes I earn enough to buy my dinner, sometimes I have nothing. That's life. It's God who decides. Sometimes in the north, we would queue up for aid, but often there were too many people. It was no longer possible.
Ahmad is now a well-known figure in the community that sprung up in the Aden cemetery. The others, too, are displaced victims of this conflict.
It breaks my heart to see him like that. I dream that he goes to school and not that he works from morning till night. This is only one sure thing for his future, education. It's so sad for this kid. We found him abandoned, but as God is my witness, we treat and love him like a son.
My dream when I grow up is to live lower down, near the market there. Leave Aden and Yemen? No, I'll never leave. It's my homeland. It's my home.
At the tip of the Arabian Peninsula and the gateway to the Red Sea, Yemen never ceases to mourn its dead and the lost glory of blessed Arabia.
Our reporter Cyril Payan is still with us here in the studio. Cyril, thank you so much for that fascinating film. Now, what we're seeing in Yemen, very much a forgotten war, as we said, is really a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Right. Very much so. And I think if we just have a look at the map to try to explain this very complex war, which again has been raging for the past 3 years, is that you have two main fronts: the pro-Shiite financed by Iran Houthi rebellion, which is controlling Sana'a, the capital, and where we were in Aden, the southern city, which is actually controlled by the loyalist pro-government forces and the southern rebellion. And you have to add to this very complex proxy war some Al-Qaeda elements and ISIS elements too. We are just taking control of many villages there. So proxy war, yes, indeed, because this is the pro-Shiite Iran group based in the north and the Sunnite led by the Sunnite group coalition, in the south.
And what you're saying there really illustrates how complicated this situation is. You mentioned the Houthis, you mentioned the royalists, you mentioned the Southern Rebellion. But then in your film, you find Sudanese soldiers in the middle of this. What is all that about?
It was a very big surprise, just in the middle of nowhere.
From Sudan?
Absolutely, and this is how it comes to be a very proxy war, as you said there. This is a regional war. This is Iran making war to Saudi Arabia, and the coalition led by the Sunnite Saudi Arabia is sending thousands of these people. This is totally secret. We have been very lucky to find them and expelled, by the way, just a few minutes after we filmed these pictures. And these are 1,000 Sudanese soldiers in the middle of the desert of Yemen, and you have Jordanian, Pakistani soldiers based there in this very much in this country.
It is a remarkable situation and very surreal in many ways, because you go from seeing these guys to finding an 8-year-old boy who's got no parents, he's got nobody around, he's basically subsisting, existing on the streets of Aden. I mean, his story was so moving.
This is, very moving indeed, and this is the other face of, probably this little boy is 8 years old, Ahmed, orphan from the north. He's an IDP, he's a local internal refugee.
And what we saw there when that man turned around and said, "Why are you filming him? He's not from round here." I mean, that sort of, it was so sad, wasn't it?
It's just the problem in Yemen. You have 2 Yemen, actually. So this little boy is just surviving in a cemetery in Aden. He has no family to sustain him, and he's living there, sustaining there. The important thing is he doesn't want to leave Yemen. He doesn't want to be a migrant. He wants to stay here.
He wants to stay there. He feels it's his home.
Absolutely.
Even though in his home,
absolutely,
he's not at home. He won't leave Yemen. Yes. He won't leave. Remarkable stuff. Cyril Payen, thank you so much for a fascinating film, a very sad film, but clearly something that really shows the situation in Yemen and how it is a forgotten war, but not here in France 24. Cyril, thank you very much indeed. You can see it again via France24.com. Of course, this is Reporters. Stay with us.